Welcome to the Battle Ready podcast, where we know that every single day is a battle. This show is about equipping you mentally, physically, and spiritually to win the daily battles. I want you to become totally free, whole, and powerful. It's time to step into your battles equipped and ready to win. I'm your host, Dr. Kaylee Judge. Let's get battle ready. Hey guys, welcome back to the Battle Ready podcast. This is Dr. Kaylee. We are still going strong with the Enneagrams. We are into type 4. The last 3 have been awesome. Angie is just bringing us loads of information and really just being able to understand who we are, how we tick, how we move, how we think. Been getting some great feedback on this. And now we're going to move into type 4, which is fun because this is Angie's type, I guess. She is a type 4 and I don't know her very well. So I'm really excited to really just skip the small talk and I get to know all the things about you right away. So
well, you'll love some things and not love some things too. So,
type 4 is categorized as the individualist, and so it says they're the expressive, dramatic, self-absorbed, and temperamental.
You got it. And one word that I just find humorous that every now and then I want to take it out of my PowerPoint when I do it when I do my trainings, but then I'm just like, but it's true. So how can I take, because it's such a descriptive term for the 4 is emotionally turbulent. Don't you love that? Right? Who doesn't want to be emotionally turbulent? Right? I'm like, there's few terms that I dislike more than that. I mean, I could think of a few, but not very many. So I'm just like, awesome. Well, this is who I am. So we'll just go with it. But I preface all that to say what we have said every single week. So I always want to preface with all that we talk about, because sometimes we can go, well, that's just who I am. And I always want to preface in case somebody comes in on just their number, which is fine, and they're not listening to the whole shebang, is that we cannot use our personality or our core traits or our unhealth as an excuse. And I say this all the time in trainings. I say this all the time when I'm working one-on-one with someone or speaking to a large group, is our personality is for awareness, not for excuses. And so that is really important. It was for me. And, I will talk. This is going to be different for me because I'm going to talk really from a more personal standpoint than I will any of the other numbers, because I relate so well with this one. And I get it because I live in it every day. The only other person that might be better is my husband sitting right next to me telling you what it's like to live with a 4. But nonetheless, it'll be fun.
I think that's such a great point to hit on that. And I think we've covered that with every single one, but it's not this whole thing is not an excuse for you to act the way that you act, especially if you're living in that unhealthy status. You said something that that really stuck out for me last week, and it was, now I just went blank. The awareness. It's about us having an awareness of where we're at. I asked her last week, if somebody is living in an unhealthy 3, what are the steps to take? Because I know that those 3s, they want the A, B, C, and D. This is what I do. This is the equation. This is how I get better. And her answer was just amazing. And it was just, listen, awareness is the key to moving from unhealthy to healthy. And it's not going to happen overnight. Right. And that's the truth for every single number. So whether you're a 3 or a 4 or a 9 or an 8 or whatever, wherever you're sitting on the board, awareness is the key, because we all have a tendency to slip into those unhealthy states that aren't fun, especially when you're aware of the unhealthy states, and then you slip into it and you're like, oh crap. Like you
Mm-hmm.
kind of catch yourself.
Yeah.
So like she was just saying, it's not these numbers like walking around saying, well, I'm a 4, so that's just how I am. That's okay. Like there's certain levels, for me, like I'm an 8, that's just how I'm going to be. But there's always room for growth. And so I want to empower you to dive into these numbers, to always be learning and wanting to grow, because you can always get to the next level, right?
Absolutely. And as we talk about, people get overwhelmed, and I think I've said this every session too. People get overwhelmed when we start talking about wings and lines and arrows and things like that. But that's what makes this tool so unique in comparison to other personalities tools. And we want to keep that in mind. So in the self-awareness piece of it all, it shows us how we move about life, because life is ever changing. Nothing is stagnant in life. If this whole thing that we've been going through over the last 8 to 10 weeks hasn't shown me anything, it's that life is unpredictable and it's ever changing. It's always changing around us. Our situations, our circumstances, the people we do life with, all of those things, our relationships are changing. And this is a tool that gives us a self-awareness of how we move about those changes in life. How are we navigating the changes that are happening? Are we navigating them in a healthy way? Are we navigating them in an unhealthy way? What is it? And so that is really, really, that for me has been the biggest piece for me. Do I always, and this is the other piece, is that yes, we use it for self-awareness, not as excuses, but that also doesn't mean that we're always going to get it right. We're not. Like perfect example, since we're talking about a 4, my withdrawal from intimacy and life and relationships was evident over the past week, which is what we do as 4s, and we'll go into that. But I knew it, I could feel it, I could sense it. And when I was able to kind of pull myself out of that and start to one of the things for a 4 is really being mindful of what you have to be thankful for. Because if I'm conscientious about all the things I have to be thankful for, then I have less time to spend on the things that are pulling me down or dragging me down emotionally. And so that's what I had to do. That's what I had to do to get myself in this better mind space, a better emotional space. And so we're not always going to get it right. There was about 4 or 5 days there that I was just what I call a funk. I was just in my 4 funk. And so we're not always going to get it right. But it at least gives us a tool as to seeing ourselves for what it is when we're not getting it right.
Yeah. I think it's cool, as I was looking through this too. So on the Enneagram, it's almost like shaped like a horseshoe, and then it's got basically like makes a star as the arrows go. And like for you, a lot of the other ones like go across to the other number, and yours kind of goes up and into the 1s and the 2s.
So you actually 4s kind of find themselves staying in their well, they stay in their triad rather than they stay in their triad when it comes to their wings, if they have a strong 3 wing, but they also stay in their triad in their unhealth, and then venture into another triad, that gut triad, as they move into growth in that 1 wing, or that 1 arrow that they will go into. And so you see that with the 5 and the 4. If you see how their lines and arrows kind of go about the shape of the Enneagram. But yeah, it's interesting because I don't probably the numbers I don't not mesh well with, but connect more with, or not connect, but I don't easily see where that person is coming from.
Yeah.
Are those 7, 8s, and 9s, which are numbers that I don't relate really with at all.
Yeah.
And so it is interesting. It's really interesting.
So let's dive into a 4. Tell me all about you.
All about me. Well, one thing, so 4s can kind of sometimes be at the opposite end of the spectrum. They can be very intuitive and sensitive, quiet at times, introspective. They're very passionate, but they can also be very whiny. They can be very self-absorbed, and they can kind of live in the negative space. And so, which isn't very fun for those that live with a 4 when they're in that space. At their best, they're very authentic and warm, compassionate, like I said, introspective. They're expressive. They're very, very artistic and creative, and refined at times. At their worst, like I said before, they can be very withdrawn. That can almost be a coping mechanism for them, is to just kind of withdraw from the world. Exaggerated moods. They can have somewhat of, I call bipolar moods a little bit. They highs and lows. Depressed, self-pitying, self-absorbed. They can be very stubborn, and possessive. And so we see the best and the worst. And I'll be honest with you, when I took the test multiple times because I didn't like what I saw on paper. I was like, I don't want to be that. So let's try to figure out a way to answer these questions to get one that I like better. But the interesting thing about it is, and the really cool thing about when you use this in conjunction with scripture and prayer, the Holy Spirit just kept drawing me and drawing me and drawing me, showing me all the amazing things about the 4, but also on the other side of the coin, showing me the things that really hold me back from living my best self. And so that was a really, really cool time for me to be shown those things.
Yeah, and it is cool. It's hard to see it at first and really start to understand. Like, I remember it was last year when I took this, about a year ago, and my friends that I was with, they were like, what number? Like, we were talking about it. I'm like, I did the test, but I didn't really look at it because I didn't really know like what I was looking at. And so then I like pulled up the answers in my email, and like she looked at them. I think I said this before, and she's like, oh, those are the 3 worst ones that could come up. And I'm like, oh God, thanks. So like, there's no worst, right? There's no, like, you might not be happy with the results, but it is a reality. And like you just said too, is like, allow God to come into your world, into your space, and like, okay, here's the things, like, search me and know my heart, like what's going on in your heart that needs to be transformed and changed, and just watch how he allows you to accept these things and then grow from them also.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's a verse that I've prayed for a very long time in my own personal life is, search me and know me, point out anything in me that is offensive to you. And as we know, all sin, all arrogance, all pride, all, negative, all of those things are offensive to a God that is holy, that we're praying to, right? And so one's no worse than the other. Some of these things we think and I think that is what is hard sometimes, is we like to categorize these things and go, well, that's worse than this, or this is worse than that, and I'd rather be this than this. And I'm like, no, none of those things are less offensive to God when you're asking him to point out anything in you that is offensive to him. So one of the struggles for a 4, and I will tell you, and I talk a lot about blind spots in my trainings. I talk a lot about blind spots with my one-on-ones, is if there is something about that number that you're wrestling with, that you just really don't want to see in yourself, I often call that a blind spot. And I'll even encourage people, ask people that you're close to, ask people that you've done life with for a long time. If you really want to get down to the bottom of it, ask people if they see this in you. And the one thing, the deep-seated struggle of a 4 is envy and jealousy. Well, you couldn't have given me a more gross, in my opinion, my own personal opinion, a more gross thing to struggle with. And at the time, it was very interesting because, speaking of the Holy Spirit, he began to show me very specific ways in which that was rearing its head in my life. My husband had been laid off from his job. We had a lot of stuff going on. And I found myself in this constant state of comparing my life to everybody else around me. And so this was a blind spot for me. And so I always encourage people, find out what your blind spot is. Find out what it is that you don't want to see in yourself, then inevitably most people already see in you. And it's not a point the finger. It's not a judgment. It's you don't want to see this, but if you'll see this, then you can grow to the next level, because this, a lot of the times, is the thing that's holding you back from going to that next level.
And I think that's in line with, like, you know how when they say, like, if you get frustrated or angry or annoyed by somebody, it's usually like something that somebody's doing. It's usually because that's something that's like resting inside of you that you do, but you're just like seeing it in them. And so once you can get that realization, you kind of like fall in line with that, that their growth can happen there, because, you know, we shouldn't be getting frustrated at other people's behaviors and their actions and the things that we're doing. You know, again, like, we got to talk about this word grace, this grace that we have for, first of all, ourselves, but then also for other people, because nobody is perfect. And so every single person is working on growing and being better. And maybe you can have a conversation with, hey, you said this or you did this, and this is how I received it. And then give them the opportunity to explain, well, that's not what I was intending to say. Here's what I meant by that. You know, and have those types of conversations. And that's when you can see both of yourselves grow, whether it's a close friend or a spouse or a sibling or a parent or whatever it is. We've got to get in these moments of having these really hard conversations, because, you know, for some people, like for me growing up, it was, let's sweep things under the rug and move on. And not go back to that. And so, you know, what my family and what my friends are doing now is, it's like, okay, let's address this, have this crucial conversation and grow through it and move past it, instead of just kind of like standing on this pile of dirt that's underneath a rug. You know, that's never going to get us to grow. So if you're seeing things getting pointed out in you and through you, be okay with that, you know, and let your friends and your family know, hey, I'm really working on myself right now, so I'm going to probably need some more grace. If you can lovingly tell me some things that, you know, aren't a good part of me, share it with me. Whether maybe it's best to share it through a text, but then don't get mad at them, right? Yeah. Like, if you ask somebody to help you through something, like, don't get mad at them for telling you, like, hey, you're doing this, this, and this. No, I'm not, you know. Receive it. Have a little bit of grace. Have grace for them. Okay, help me move through this. Help me work through this. And then go to God in prayer and see what happens. I promise you're going to see some massive things happen.
Yeah. And I've also seen even in my own life, is if we're willing to go to people outside of the heat of something that has actually happened. So what do I mean by that? So if I go to my best friend or I go to my husband, the best time to go to my husband and ask him, hey babe, like, is there anything that just really drives you crazy about me? Like, is there anything that you would say, like, hey, I love you, but this is an area you could work on, or whatever. The best time for me to go to him and ask him those questions is when we're in a good space, right? for me to be willing to go to him and ask him that, rather than him telling me all the things that need to change, or vice versa, in the heat of an argument, or in the heat of something happening between us or in our relationship. Same with friendships or whatever. One of the things that I was talking to someone just in the last few days, a couple of different people actually, is this whole, you alluded to going to someone and having a conversation and asking, hey, what did you mean by that? And clarifying, right? The thing that I believe that is the pitfall of most relationships, and just life in general, is our tendency to make assumptions. And when we understand this tool as a tool to be able to go to someone and check the facts on, well, what did you mean by that? When you said this, how did you mean that? Or what did that mean for me? That is effort given to that relationship of not assuming that someone absolutely meant the worst.
Yeah.
And I know for fours, we can dig deep into that easily. We can assume the worst instead of expecting the best. And when we get into that mode is when we start to kind of decline into our emotions. So that's, fours do that often. They decline into their emotions. Their emotions and themselves are almost one. Sometimes they have a hard time separating, whereas some numbers on the Enneagram separate their emotions too easily. Fours often feel one with their emotions, often too often. And so when we can decline into that, when we're not on top of making sure we're checking the facts and making sure we're staying on top of those relationships and things like that. So that's really important for all of us, but it's really important for fours. The wings for a four are 3 and 5. We've talked about wings in each of our segments. So just always remember that your wings are on either side of your number. It's not across the way and it's also not your second number that you get on the assessment. Some people will get like a 4, 2, and a 7, and they'll say, oh, I'm a 4 with a 2 and a 7 wing. That's not accurate. So just remember what your wings are. They're the numbers on either side of your number. And I like to describe them as a way that your number is kind of flavored. It's some people utilize one of their wings more often than the other. And sometimes they do have that strong, I'm a 4 with a 3 wing, and I never tap into that 5 wing. But the 4 with the 3 wing is more determined. They're more of a self-starter, and they're very much more of an extrovert. Whereas that 4 with a 5 wing will disengage easily. They'll withdraw. They're more of an introvert. They're more cerebral. They're more in their head. And they can cut off from their emotions more easily than just your average 4. Because 5s can do that easily. So I have found, this is really interesting personal testimony here. The interesting thing is I truly believe I tap into my 3 wing more than my 5 wing. However, it's been very interesting in this quarantine time how I really have utilized my 5 wing in order to stay focused, stay on top of some projects that I'm working on, which 5s can do that very easily, and to seclude myself, study, read up, work on PowerPoints, work on things. Whereas typically I'm that extrovert that wants to be out with people all the time, every day. So it's been interesting. I haven't throughout this whole thing, like I said earlier, I haven't done that in a healthy way always, but I have learned to tap into some of those 5 characteristics in a way that I don't typically do when, the city or the state's not shut down. So that's been really interesting for me.
Which again, like, we have to be able to meld and change. Like, you're not like, if you come in like 5 months ago, you would have said I'm a 4 with a 3 wing, right?
Hands down.
And so now it's like, I think you said this in some other of the podcasts, like, you're not married to that wing. The wing is there to help you change and move, really flying. Like, you watch a bird fly, like, they're like shifting their weight on
it's this balance.
Yeah. And so, like you said, like, you may, like, for me, like, I'm an 8 with a 9 wing. Like, that's where I naturally tap into more. I'm the one that brings the peace, but I'm also like very good at like charging ahead. But I can shift into that other 9 or the other 1 wing or 7 wing if I needed to, or when it prevails, so to not be stuck with that setting of, this is like, I am this and this is all that I am, right? Be able to grow and use all of that.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so fun about the Enneagram, the knowledge that we gain when we study each of the numbers is really quite powerful in obviously understanding other people that are different than us, but also seeing little qualities within each of the other number that we can relate to, because I truly believe that there are pieces of each of the numbers that we can say, oh, I'm a little bit like that. I don't relate strong and hardcore to an 8, but when I see injustice happen, my blood boils, right? When I see an outright injustice that I'm passionate about. And so there's little things within each of the numbers that we can go, yeah, I relate to that. Or gosh, I see where they're coming from. And it helps us in that way and can be quite powerful, actually.
We talked about this in one of the episodes where we said that, we are created as the image of God, right? So we're created in his image. And then, we've got to talk about Jesus in this too, is that, he's the only perfect one. And we talked about this before, is that, how many of those numbers does he represent? And I promise you that all 9 of these personalities are represented by Jesus as in his life and through the stories of the Bible. And so really what we're striving for is to be more like him and to be who God created us to be. And Jesus wasn't stuck with one number, right? He wasn't stuck with one personality. He became who he needed to become to transform the people that he was around in those moments. And, so same thing with us too. If we're working towards that, I'm not saying like, let's go take the month of May and become a 1, it's not where I'm going to, but like, how much of these things can we like, oh, I really think that that's something that's missing in my life that I want to implement into my world.
Absolutely. Because in Jesus's ministry, if you look at Jesus and the people that he encountered, he was so different with the Pharisees than he was the adulterous woman, right? He was so different with the woman at the well than he was the feeding of the 5,000. And he was so like, you see all of the different parts of who he was. And as we transform, scripture says, right, that we work out our salvation with fear and trembling. I love that verse. It's not that we work for that salvation, but that we're always on this journey. Anytime someone hires me as their coach, my first thing that I always say to them is, thank you for allowing me to walk this journey with you, because that's what it is. So as we're on this journey, we are striving to be like Christ. When we're talking about the Enneagram from a spiritual perspective or from a biblically based perspective. And as we look at each of the different numbers, and Jesus was an individualist, if ever there was one, he was so creative in how he met people right where they were. He was always thinking, always imagining, always imagining how he can meet the broader spectrum of people for salvation, right? And that is what a 4 is. They're very creative, they're very artistic, they're very imaginative, sometimes too much so in their negative space. They can get too much in their imagination, they can get too much in their head, and they can live almost in a dream world sometimes. So sometimes it takes those people, like my husband. I'm so thankful for him. He is my person that pulls me back. He's so good at so gently pulling me back into reality. He loves to dream with me, but he can also pull me right back to reality in such a graceful way. And I would say to 4s out there, have those people that can pull you back to reality, that allows you to dream, but also pulls you back to reality in a graceful way. Have those people. It's super important.
That's good.
Yeah.
So should we talked about both wings, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about moving into growth and moving into stress. Where do y'all go?
Yeah, where do we go? Where do we move? I always like to say I don't love saying that we move. That's what lines and arrows insinuate. I like to say that we exemplify those higher or lower qualities of those numbers in our stress or in our growth. And so with stress, 4 will exemplify some of the average to unhealthy parts of 2, the helper. We've talked about the 2. So aloof 4s suddenly become over-involved and they cling to others. They try to manipulate others into loving them, because you have to understand something about a 4 is if they're desperate for love, or they're desperate to feel love just for who they are, then they can do it in all the wrong ways and with all the wrong tactics. And that's when they kind of move to that unhealthy side of the 2. They believe getting attention from others will replace their own emptiness and loneliness. So the thing about a 4, especially in their stress, but 4s in general walk around often feeling like something is missing all the time. That is really important to understand if you are a 4. Because I know that there have been so many gaps in my life that I can pinpoint that just felt like something was missing. And I would search and I would search and I would look and I would look and I would try to figure out what it was. But there's just this feeling that 4s kind of walk around with, that something is missing. They also can look back on the course of their life and kind of feel like most of their life they've been different. Like they didn't, and I can say that for myself. I didn't feel like, I always felt like I was different than my family and my siblings and people that I went to school with. I meshed in some seasons of my life, and then in some seasons I kind of felt like an alien in a foreign land, if you will. And so that was something that helped me to pinpoint my number in the very beginning too, is looking across the course of my life. So that's really important for a 4 also. But for growth for a 4, and I love this, my dad is a 1. He's never taken the assessment, but I know he's a 1. He's amazing. He's awesome. And so I can relate with him in my growth on so many levels of moving or exemplifying some of the healthy qualities of the 1, the perfectionist, where envious, emotionally, that's where I have it, emotionally turbulent 4s, they become more objective. They can see more the black and white, the wrong and right. They can be more principled in their conviction and their viewpoints. And they become more disciplined and grounded. and not so kind of all over the place. I know my poor husband thinks I'm all over the place sometimes. They are more productive and they do what is right. They become more objective in their growth. And so that's really, really important to understand. And so if you're confused, or if you're still kind of on the fence with what is my number, I haven't nailed it down. I often tell people to look at their core fear, core desire, but especially a 4, look at your stress and look at your growth, and kind of ask yourself in those seasons of stress, how did you respond? And in the moments of your life where you really felt like you were on that path of growth, how did you respond? Or what did life look like? And that can be very telling for the 4.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Thumbs up on the 4.
What else do they need to know about 4s? We talked about this last time for 3, and I like the question where you took it is, how do you be in a relationship with a 4? Okay. Whether you can talk spousal relationship, or you can talk just a friendship relationship too, because those might be 2 different levels.
Yeah, and it is 2 different levels, but in essence, we have to know how, when God said in Genesis, he said, it is not good for man to be alone. I don't believe that he was just talking about spouse there. I believe he was talking about, right? So we are called to be in community with people, whether that's in deep intimacy with a spouse, or friendships, or community, or whatever that looks like. We're called to be in community. And really using this tool is a little bit the same across the board. I mean, yes, when you're living with somebody, it can get a little dicier.
I think it's funny that you say that we need to be in community, which I 100% agree with. And yet that's the thing that they've taken away from us in this season, this time. Yeah.
And it's been interesting to see how people have responded. So again, one personal testimony, my husband went out of town last week to help take care of his mom, who had a hip replacement surgery. Finally, they let her have it. And I found myself, because he was my community for the last 8 to 10 weeks, pretty much, I found myself in this, that's kind of when I went into my emotionally turbulent mode and cutting myself off from people and the world, because I found myself with zero community, right? Like with nothing, because I wasn't going to work. I wasn't meeting one-on-one with clients and things like that. And so that was really interesting to me to have that taken away, even for a few days, and to see how it impacted me personally. And I had to be really aware of that and come out of that and pull myself out of that, because it wasn't good. It wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy for my kids. It wasn't healthy for any phone call that I would have in those few days. It just wasn't good. But how to get along with a 4 is they struggle a great deal with shame, since they feel that something is missing. So give them plenty of compliments. And it sounds so, oh gosh, I don't know. When I read some of these, I can read the other ones and not have any issues. But then when I read these, I'm just like, oh, I really like that. Like, do I really need lots of compliments? But really and truly, they just need to feel like they matter, and that their presence matters, and that they stand out in your life. Like there's a part of them that stands out in their life, like that they create a space for you that nobody else can replace, if that makes sense. Help me to love myself by seeing there is nothing missing in me, and that I am created with beauty and qualities God intended for me to have. Please see and respect me for my special gifts and intuition and vision. They're big visionaries. The thing about 4s is They want their vision to be appreciated, but then they also need people to come around them to help bring those visions about, because they can be all over the place. And then don't tell them they're too sensitive or overreacting. Instead, just give them space to have their feelings. And most of the time, a self-aware 4 will get themselves back into a good headspace. But let them have their emotion. Don't tell them they're being too emotional, and to get over it, because in that moment, they won't get over it. That's insulting to them.
You just kind of get stuck in there.
Yeah, 4s can. They can get stuck. And that's why it's really important to understand the levels of health. Because like I said last week, when we started to talk about some of the levels of health, even with the 3, but all this goes with all numbers, is most of us, I would dare to say, a vast majority of people live, breathe, sleep, and survive in the average place of life, right? We just do. And I would say that made this whole pandemic thing could be a good thing that has come out of this, is that maybe some people have become aware that they kind of live in that space, and they've had some time to grow, maybe. Or if they haven't, they should take some time to grow. But when we're living in that average space, it is so easy for life to hit and us to nosedive into the unhealthy. And that can be really hard on a 4, because they're so emotional. So for me, it's really important. I can't pull myself out of that emotionally turbulent space in 3 to 4 days if I'm not being super aware. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I can slip even further into that. And which is why 4s really battle depression. I battled depression for 7 years of my life. I was on medication for depression for 7 years. And praise God, I've been off of it for 12. And I'm thankful for that. But it's taken a lot of self-work and self-awareness to get to that place, because when 4s are in that emotional space, it's really hard to separate. It's hard to separate the good and the bad and the negative and the positive.
Yeah.
And see the positive in the midst of all of it.
Yeah, I was looking and looking at the unhealthy levels here. Just on, I like to use EnneagramInstitute.com as one of my favorite. Yeah, it's just got like so much solid information there.
Yeah.
But just really looking into the unhealthy space of that. The one right here says that they drive away anyone who tries to help them. And so if you've got someone that you know is in that space of, okay, yes, you're a 4, or maybe you are the 4, and you can just feel yourself like closing these doors. Anybody that wants to come help, it's like, nope, I'm good. I'll make it. I'll figure it out on my own. In reality, what that's going to send you further down is into an even deeper self-destructive space.
Yeah, and what I found in my own life, and this is interesting, it says relationship issues. One of the things that I talk with clients about is because 4s become very self-absorbed when they're struggling, then they do put that wedge and push people away. They become very self-absorbed. And so I know this in my own life. And so so what happens is we become, as a 4, we become so connected with our own emotions that I hate to say don't care about the emotions of others, but the reality is, in that unhealthy space, it seems as though we don't care about the emotions of the other person or that person that's trying to help us. And that's not good.
Yeah.
That's not good at all. So yes, that is extreme. That's very important to understand in relationships and a relationship issue that a 4 will often run into.
And then the flip side of that is the healthy is that you're expressive and that you want yourself to be better. You renew yourself, and it says regenerating. So basically, like, I think about like the life cycle of a cell. It's constantly changing, constantly coming back to life, constantly renewing itself to not be the same version, but to become a better, stronger version of what it was before. And so I just think that that's a powerful explanation of that. And so, we kind of gave you 2 different levels of the unhealthy versus the healthy. And we want to start working towards that. And the way to get to that is, moving up these steps of figuring out where you are, getting yourself around the right type of people to speak life into you, but also to kind of point out the spaces where you're not doing so well. And it's not because you're not good enough. It's because you've worked in this cycle for so long and haven't had the right people telling you the right things to get you to grow through that. So if you are sitting in a level 4, just know that there is an ability for you to come out of that deep, dark hole that you've allowed yourself to build a room and a bunker in. Right. And, right. It's just a matter of recognizing your truth, recognizing what the actual truth is. There's one book that I read, it's called The Truest Thing About You. And I don't have the author with me. Maybe I can bring it up here in a second, but he talks about how, there's things in your life that may be true. Like you may be going through a divorce. You maybe have lost all your friends. You maybe have lost your job. You maybe have done all these things are true things, but it's not the truest thing about you. The truest thing about you is that you were made and created by God. And that's where we find our identity and our anchor into. It's just that's a powerful book. Go ahead.
David Lomas.
Yeah. David Lomas. It's a quick read and it will suck you in. It will just like, how did I not know this about myself? And then it helps you see other people too in conjunction with this. And it's like, oh my word,
Yeah. And which is something that I was going to say. So we have to also look at the core fear and the core desire of each number 2, which is really important, because when we hear the word core, that means it goes deep inside of us. That means it is planted deep inside of us when we hear that word core, right? And so the core fear of a 4 is being inadequate, plain, emotionally cut off, common, ordinary, abandoned, or flawed. And that is deep seated inside of them. They don't want to be seen that way, and they don't want to feel that way. And then the core desire is to find themselves in their unique significance. It's so important. I could not go to a job. I actually was an office admin for a great ministry. Loved my boss. He was so good for me, good to me. And for that season of life, it was provision. But I knew, and I told him probably I worked with him for almost 11 years, and probably at every one of my annual, meetings that we would have, I would say, this isn't my calling, Mike. This isn't my calling. This isn't my calling. This isn't what I'm called to do. And so there was always this searching inside of me for what I was supposed to do, my calling, what it is that I'm supposed to do. And that is important for a 4. It's not sufficient for a 4 just to go to a job and have a paycheck. It's just not. It's not for, I don't think it is for any of us, but for a 4, that's a struggle. And so people ask me all the time, well, what is this core fear and this core desire? What's the answer for that? And the cool thing about it is while every core fear and core desire is different on the Enneagram, the antidote for the core fear and the core desire is the same. And that's Jesus.
Yeah.
It's Jesus. It is the fact that Jesus gives me significance. Jesus gives me a feeling that I matter. Jesus takes away the feeling that I'm mundane or ordinary, because he says you're uniquely made in me, that I wove you together. Well, when I think about being woven together, my mind goes to Africa when I went to Ghana, Africa, and would watch the women weave these blankets together, and every one of the blankets looked different. Everyone. There was not one blanket that was the same. And that's when I think of that verse, that's what I think about. And it's so significant to me to think of that verse in that term, in those terms, because it makes me feel like my core fear and my core desire has already been taken care of through the blood of Christ and how he created me. And so I always tell people that even though we're different all across the board with the core fear and the core desire, the antidote for each of our core fears and core desires is the same.
And on that note, I think we can wrap it up. What do you think?
I think so.
Cool. So with that being said, we just want to let you know, Angie, that we love you and we thank you, and you are so super appreciated when it comes to learning about these things and just knowing who we are and why we matter and where we come from. Guys, you can find Angie on Instagram at Kairos Coaching, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
I'll make sure I put it in the show notes again. It's in all the other ones. I've got her website in there. You can go link up with her if you want to kind of dive into your number a little bit more. She does amazing Enneagram coaching and all kinds of other things too. Just link up with her. We've also still got the opportunity for you to get on a discovery call with me. You can text the word battle to 33777. That will send you a link to get you set up with a time to schedule a discovery call with me. It's about 30 minutes. We'll see if we're right for each other, see if there's anything that I can help bring you to the next level in your life. And that's it for today. Biggest thing is renew your mind, refine your body, refresh your spirit, and go out and be battle ready. We love you guys. We'll see you next week.